Okay. So, eto na po. This is what I would like to share, and maybe I will speak in mixed language. Sometimes I will shift to Filipino. Since this has been what I learned and worked with for the last how many decades, at least 3 decades, I would like to share what we have learned so far, both in the Philippines and maybe a broader Southeast Asian context. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so maybe I would just want to refer to a definition by the UN Task Force on SSE that has been more or less agreed upon by many UN organizations that work together within the UN context. So I think I don't need to belabor the fact that SSE organizations and enterprises have explicit social and often environmental objectives guided by the principles of cooperation, solidarity, equity, and democratic self-management. So maybe the key word here is democratic self-management. So it's essentially a participatory organization, what we term as SSE. So it's also an attempt to reassert social control over the economy, because now it's a runaway economy that's profit-driven and enriching a very few people, with extreme inequality now being the global reality. And I think we need to emphasize collective action and active citizenship for both economic and political empowerment of disadvantaged groups in society. So I think one big disadvantaged group, and I think Natsi and Katraining and every woman participating in this forum will agree with, is that women are disadvantaged. So they are also among the majority in the working poor or in the informal economy part of the bigger economic reality. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So I just want to emphasize maybe and add a bit more to what Shigeru mentioned, is that we need to be inspired by the fact that SSC is now a global movement and it's fast expanding, and more women are engaged in it. So among the co-ops, 3 million of them, there are 1 billion members and 280 million are employed by co-ops worldwide. And then, of course, there is social enterprise, which is also very much in the picture in the Philippines. And then sa kababaihan, sa India, sa South Asia, marami talaga yung mga women in self-help groups. And then fair trade, and of course, they're part of REPES and ASEC, etc. And there are ministries already in many countries that cater to SSE. So next, please. Next, please. Okay, so now what is our context? We need to address the goals of sustainable human development, because it has been mentioned over and over that our current neoliberal development model has failed us spectacularly, especially now when we are in a pandemic. No? So we have persistent poverty, and we have extreme inequality, and we only have 11 years to go bago magunaw ang mundo. This is an existential challenge because we have a very urgent environmental crisis that has now become not only a climate crisis, but a climate emergency. And with COVID-19 pandemic, there's more impoverishment, more hunger, and massive unemployment. Next, please. Next slide, please. So particularly women are in crisis because only half of them are considered economically active and in the labor force. And women do 4.1 times more unpaid care work than men in Asia and the Pacific. And in the Philippines, we have the same data. So women are particularly vulnerable, and if they are able to work, they are in the unprotected informal economy. informal employment because it's compatible with what they do at home, which we call reproductive work. And under COVID, women are the frontliners in healthcare, etc. They do more work at home, taking care of children, cooking, etc. They have been displaced from formal and informal work, and they are more and more subjected to domestic and cyber violence. Next slide, please. Okay, so in the face of all this, the Homenet networks, we now have a Homenet International that really want to focus on the fact that informal workers are essential workers and society cannot recover without us. No? So there are many forms of advocacy that we have been engaged in since day one. We started our sub-regional workshop on SSE in 2008 after we attended Kuya Ben's big workshop in UP in 2007. And we had another huge gathering in our college in 2013 where we had about 500 from people from 5 continents gathering to talk about SSE as the alternative to neoliberal globalization. And of course, with fair trade, you have workers' rights, social protection, occupational safety and health, and gender equity, and women's economic empowerment. We first started with fair trade advocacy and social marketing. We shifted to SSE. Next, please. So next slide, please. So what we have now, the earlier slide, please, is that we have a cooperative on Maginhawa Street. We started with consumer-supported organic agriculture. We have organic vegetables and eggs and many and natural condiments. So we're into healthy and safe food and support for organic producers. But with COVID, we had to shift to face masks, hand sanitizers, and other necessities that are required by communities in order to survive. So next slide, please. So in the garment center of the Philippines, our home-based workers shifted not only to face masks, but also PPE, what is called personal protective equipment. And many of them are employed in this new social enterprise that has been launched as a way of seizing the opportunity that COVID-19 presented. But it's a group that's unique, and I don't think it's replicable in other areas where garments is not really the industry that is in the forefront. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so then I just want an example that talks about grassroots and which can inspire us. That grassroots women, when they are organized, they are very creative, very resourceful, and they can build on what they have and survive disasters. We have this very good group. Patamaba is part of the 26-member network of Homenet. So they have a microfinance program that has 540 clients, involving 5 million among them. And they have social protection in the form of damayan. And then during disasters, there is this fund drives and other ways of networking with government agencies, NGOs, FSSI in particular, and academia. So they're into food production,
Hello? Dean Inday? I think Dean Inday is probably having problems with her internet.
back.
There you are. Okay, Dean. Okay.
Sorry.
I was worried for a while.
Okay. So can I continue? I'm about to be done
Yes,
anyway.
Dean.
Okay, where is my slide? Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so this is just an example because now the problem is hunger and food security. And then the Iloilo group, they started a community garden and they're doing all this vegetable production and marketing in land that they till together. And they produce all these juice bags that are used as planters, but they are also very practical for computers and for marketing, etc. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, this is the supply chain of Benny that I think we need to understand more clearly. But it shows how people should be able to participate from input supply to production to marketing and consumption, and then also the financial flow going back. And you can see the biosphere, the limits of nature. We cannot go beyond this, and we need to respect and protect the environment. And then maybe what Shigeru mentioned earlier, that we are always looking for partners, but the key is managed enterprise on the right. But we can connect, as the Iloilo groups have shown, with government, local government in particular, private business like the Foundation for Sustainable Society, civil society, women's rights organizations, etc. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is our reflections and conclusions. Now, because of the fourth industrial revolution, where half of all jobs will disappear, the drying up of the overseas labor market, I understand we have OFWs among our audience, we really need to create jobs for ourselves. And we need to do it fast to survive the pandemic. And then for microfinance to work, it really needs to be supplemented by many things like capacity building, social protection, etc. And now we have to focus on sustainable agriculture, food security and sovereignty. And because we have typhoons galore, Iloilo suffered Typhoon Frank, Typhoon Yolanda, Typhoon Ursula, but they survived all that because they are climate proofing their agriculture, they are building back better, and they are able to nurture what they have and build them up. And then, of course, gender is very important because it is women who put food on the table, who suffer most during crisis. And they are in many SSE formations, but they are not necessarily in the leadership. So we need to really make sure that women are engaged and they are empowered and they can lead. No? So we need to go back to basics. So we need to organize, we need to do awareness-based building, capacity building, partnership, etc. Next slide, please. Okay. So I think this is my last slide. So thank you very much for listening. So the point here is that we need to go from local to global. So thank you. Thank you.